Welcome to Big Papa Rob's podcast Story Rewind, The Missing. I'm Big Papa Rob. Each of my stories are about one of the many missing people out there. I rewind the story of a missing person in hopes that someone will hear this story and can share information to help find this missing person. There is always someone who knows something that can help find this person. Today will be part 2 of the Heather Teague story. This story will be told by her mother through an interview we had. After talking with Sarah Teague, I decided that the interview in its entirety needed to be heard by you. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, or opinions of Big Papa Rob's podcast Story Rewind. Information shared on this podcast does not imply endorsement or the opposition to any organization or persons. You will be hearing Sarah Teague discuss her daughter Heather Teague that was abducted from Newburgh Beach in Spotsville, Kentucky, August 26, 1995. If you haven't listened to last week's episode, I'd encourage you to go listen to it first. Now let's rewind this story to its earliest beginnings. Tell me about your daughter. Tell me how she was as a child growing up. I mean, I know that I've seen that she was an honor student when she was in high school and things, but just tell me a little bit about your daughter.
Well, if we're going to rewind, and when I was looking, how you do your podcast, it came to me just a few minutes ago that in order to rewind this, on August the 25th of 1974, when Heather was 23 months old, I wrote in a journal, and this journal came back to me in it was 3 weeks after Heather was taken, that a box of things that I had left in the attic where we grew up in Seabury was brought back to me. I had been searching for Heather that day, and the bottom of this box was a journal that I had written to Heather when she was 23 months old. An entry dated August the 25th, 1974. I wrote, "I am so afraid a big man will someday take my Heather away." On August the 26th, 1995, when she was 23 years old, that's what they told us had happened.
Wow.
And that gave me such strength and hope that day, because I remember it was 3 weeks, the moon was full, and I sat out on the front porch going through this box of things. Heather's baby teeth were in there. And that day in particular, I had come home and I was so angry because I had told the people that were there, I said, "We're playing hardball." I said, "Something is so wrong." And so I knew that was a gift from God to give me strength to go on. Now people tell me, well, you spoke that into existence. Well, for me, I know our words are powerful and that they really are powerful, but I also know that there's such a bigger picture going on here, because I know you've read Heather's writings. She wrote, "And I'm a poster child," months before she was. And then she wrote about, like she was being watched. And so there is a much bigger picture going on here than a lot of people realize, that I wanted to share that with you.
I appreciate that.
When Heather was growing up, she was my little sidekick. She was really shy. She was 22 months old when her little sister Holly was born, but she was right beside me all the time. I'd sit up at night and sew, and she would sit right beside me. She could write her print her ABCs when she was 2.5 years old, because I worked with her. She was everything that I never was. She could speak. Well, I do now, but speak in front of a crowd. She could work a chemistry problem all the way across the board. She was absolutely brilliant. And she also got this from me, I suppose, not the brilliance, the being able to see things that from people that would just break your heart, you know. And of course, I know you read what she wrote, that I'm absolutely living every word she wrote. You know, beside intolerant faces I stand, holding heart and soul in hand, reaching for someone to comprehend, to recognize my struggle, my desperation. And I send that to the state police quite often to remind them that there's a bigger picture going on here.
I agree. Let's talk about the days leading up to when she was abducted.
This is a big part of this story too, because 10 days prior to this, on August the 16th, I came home and she had decorated my home. She had the front door locked, so I would have to go in the back door. And she had the whole house was full of really weird stuff. But I know now that she was trying to tell me something. I know without a doubt she was. In fact, she told Holly and Haven after after the cops were called, which I didn't want them to call the cops, but her dad did, as if she, were going to commit suicide. I knew that wasn't the case. I knew she was troubled because of some things that was going on in our life. This man that I was seeing, I knew there was a lot more, going on. Now looking back, knowing what I know now, I wish she'd been able to have confided in me with everything that was going on. But as usual, my life was such a mess that she didn't. And I saw her on Thursday. This was 10 days prior. I saw her on Thursday before this happened on Saturday. And I won't ever forget it, because I had just enrolled in school, just had went back to enroll. I'd already had my basics down, and I enrolled in school. She had gone to the doctor on August the 8th. And on the way home from enrolling in classes, I said, God, please just let Heather be on my couch. Well, I came home and there she was. She was laying on my couch. And I got a sheet and covered her up. And then I laid right beside her and watched every move she was making, breathing. And I would close my eyes if she moved. I didn't want her to know I was watching her. And I went and bought some grapes and a sausage pizza that I knew she'd pick the sausages off of. And I stood and watched her do that. And then I watched her drive away. And the last words that we ever spoke, I said, Heather, why are you so angry? And she said, I wish I knew. And I've spent 28 years wishing that I knew. And of course, what we know now is the last 4 months has been really amazing in what's been revealed. I know you don't want to talk about that yet, but
The morning of Heather's disappearance, I've read that she had gone to her boyfriend's house and then he was supposed to meet her at the beach. Can you verify that information or tell me in your words what happened that morning?
no, she didn't go to her boyfriend's house. She played cards with some of her friends, and the thing that we know now is that, her boyfriend was supposed to have met her at noon. She had made a call to him at the Red Horse Lounge. I'd spoken with Nancy Beard, the owner of the place, and Heather had made a phone call. I really think Chris Belo was there then. I don't know. According to Nancy Beard, somebody was like watching her or whatever. And then even the eyewitness, in part of his story, the reason he claimed that he waited so long is he thought it was her boyfriend playing a joke. And we'll get into that later too. But she had gone to the beach to wait for her boyfriend, Robin Lewis. And of course he was into drugs. And so that kind of ties in when Tim Walthall says he thought it was her boyfriend playing a joke. He didn't come to meet her. And of course, he showed up on the beach and did the polygraph. He did the. He's a little bitty guy, little bitty man. He wasn't the one that took her.
In last week's episode, I played the 911 call that was recorded and released in 2016. Tell us your version and what you know about the 911 call.
Well, from what we know now, and it came out in the August 30th issue of the Gleaner, that there was not an official 911 call. He did not call for help. And on the August 30th issue of the Gleaner, it states plainly, the witness claims he called 911, but there is no record of any such call. And of course, now that I have the FBI files, I've got it noted. He actually called, and of course, we had to fight. It took us 20 years before we heard that call.
Mm-hmm.
And it took us, let's see, in 2007, we went to court to get the call. I mean, this whole time, what I've been trying to do is give the state police information that Marty Deal was not the man that took Heather. I mean, I've got 5 statements from family and friends, 3 jail records. I've got a letter from his mother. I have the poster. Do you want me to show you that poster?
Sure. I believe this is the one you had on your interview on WEHT TV.
Well, here it is. Yes. I don't know how much you can see.
It's coming through really well.
Okay.
And that's the picture of his
This is
driver's
Marty Deal's
license.
94 driver's license.
Okay.
That's the sketch of the face. And as you can see, it's absolutely identical down to an underbite and a shadow.
Yep.
This is how Marty Deal looked July the 15th of 95, a few weeks before Heather was taken. So this is the sketch that I have taken years and years and years, standing there with tears in my eyes saying, can't you see this? Can't you see this? No. We don't. We think he's got his hair pulled back in a ponytail there. Now that you've heard the audio that I just heard July the 29th, you know that they knew on day 4 that Marty Deal was not the man.
And I did find in, I can't remember which months, but I did find in the newspaper that they even mentioned that Marty had buzzed hair in newspaper articles. Well, but there was never a shot of that picture of him in any of the articles. It's almost always has been the Evansville police mugshot, which I'm assuming, you can correct me if I'm wrong, from the February incident where he was arrested.
Right. And that is what they cleverly, and this is what I just wrote to Chip yesterday and to Lieutenant Pryor. KSP cleverly put that mugshot up because it didn't look a thing like that's not what they used. It took me 18 months, and let me tell you how that happened. I had the newspaper articles laid out on my table, and this is just how God works. It was in the very back page in a little small picture of, and 18 months later, and there it was. That I said, that's what they used for the sketch. It's identical, So now I'm just totally amazed at how far they have gone to hide what really happened August the 26th of 1995 on Newburgh Beach. Something happened because when we got the phone call, it was Henderson Police Department. Now, Henderson Police Department is where James Hendricks worked as a police officer, and we know for a fact that he met her the night before. Now, you know how complicated this is, and it took me until February the 18th of 2009, when the FBI was already taken off the case. The agent that had worked with me, with our family for 2.5 years, brought James Hendricks to my home. And I've got the whole transcript. Of course, I recorded it. I had recorders in every room. Mm-hmm. And I've got the transcript printed out. And he says what he came there for was to clear up a rumor that he had seen Heather 3 weeks prior. Well, now that I've got the FBI files and the state police files, it's documented that he said he had seen her on August the 23rd. And of course, we know it was the night before too. So to me, that established an ongoing relationship with Heather and James Hendricks.
Well,
Which,
and I know there was allegations around when he left the FBI of sexual misconduct in his office, from what I've read.
well, when he came
So
to me, he was head of pornography in Bluegrass, Arkansas. He moved on up the road to Washington D.C., where he was also head of pornography. And now, of course, I don't even know if he has a job anymore. But
last I read, it looked like he either quit before charges were formally made against him in the FBI office.
right, but what's so important is in January of '08, I think it was January the 31st, actually, of '08. Chip and I turned in the tape conversations that I had recorded with Tim Walthall, where he said the back of Marty's head was blown away and there wasn't even an exit wound. I mean, I've got him on recording saying, that SOB was laying on a slab in the morgue and blood was everywhere. And I didn't want to turn him over. And he chopped his hair off with scissors. And they all knew. Now I know on day 4 that Marty Deal was not the man that took Heather.
Based on the FBI file that you shared with me, it appears that Tim waited 45 minutes before he actually made the call to 911, which I don't understand anybody waiting 45 minutes when you see something like that happen. When did you get actually contacted by the police?
I think it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Holly and I were just talking about this the other day. It was the Henderson Police Department that called, and they were in such a panic. They said, "Do you know where Heather is? Do you know where Heather is? Hang on a minute. Let me call you right back." Then they called back. They called back 2 or 3 times saying, "Do you know where Heather is?" And then finally they said, "Well, she left her car abandoned at Newburgh Beach." Of course, they already knew at that time that she had been allegedly dragged into the woods. Now that hardly anything this eyewitness has said has been true, and even the Kentucky State Police took up for him, saying, well, he claims people are saying that he waited and he didn't. Well, he did. Now that I've got the state police files and interview after interview with Walthall on paper, he says he and his wife were eating lunch at noon, and then he waits until 1:15 p.m. to call straight through to Indiana State Police. What was he doing for an hour and 15 minutes?
Yep.
If it was 12:30, what was he doing for 45 minutes?
Now, I'm assuming when you got the call, you went to Newburgh Beach area.
Yes, I had never heard of Newburgh Beach, and Holly and I took off there. Of course, looking back, by the time we got there, it was Kentucky State Police's case. We just put together years later that it was the Henderson Police Department who had called in such a panic. And of course, it was 2008, I think, before we ever heard of James Hendricks at all. So, looking back, it was Henderson Police Department that was in such a panic. And by the time we got there were yellow police, taped off. And of course, I've said this 1,000 times, but you don't ever forget that empty lounge chair.
Yep.
The side of that empty lounge chair. And, David Osborne, the lieutenant, pulled out Heather's bathing suit top and asked, was it hers? And of course I said it was. And then I didn't know years later that Tim Walthall was right there watching us. I didn't officially meet him until November the 22nd of 95. I went to his home, and I remember looking at that telescope, and it looked like it was a huge thing. And I remember asking him, is that a video camera under there? Because it looked like it had a camera underneath the telescope thing. It wasn't just a telescope. And he called me into the kitchen. Now, even at this time, November the 22nd of 95, even if by then people were already coming to me saying Marty Deal was bald. Marty Deal wasn't even on the beach that day. I had a man who owned East End Pawn Shop, Don Parker. I went to his home, and he said, Miss Teague, Marty was behind my shop working on a lawnmower at 1:00. And then, of course, now I have the state police's files. He was actually feeding goats with his son at around 1:00. But he did leave with Mike Shelton at 3:00 in the afternoon. And in 98, Mike Shelton was overheard saying that Heather was accidentally run over.
During my research, I came across an article about a Michelle Morgan that saw a red Chevette on the road going to Reed, Kentucky, where a shaggy haired guy was fighting with a woman. Is there anything to that story?
Yes.
Okay.
The red Chevette was tied to Robin Lewis, her boyfriend at the time's best friend. He was in jail at the time, not Robin. His name is Trapper John Mooney. He was. That's who the car belonged to. And in 2016, I got information from a lady who had actually come forward the week after Marty Deal was dead, telling the state police that Mike Shelton had come to her home Sunday morning, white as a sheet, sweating, needing her husband to pull his truck out of the bottoms. And guess what he was driving?
The
red
Bronco?
Chevette. The red
the Chevette.
So when this lady gave this information to the police, it would have been maybe September the 7th, a week after Marty ended up dead. The lieutenant, whoever it was, said, well, thank you for coming in. We'll contact you if we need anything. Didn't take down her name, her number, or anything. So 2016, she comes forward and lets me know about Mike Shelton coming to her home, and she goes to the police station, and another lady went with her. The meeting was recorded, and I'm pretty sure it's on the audio that I have too, audios that I have. But she tells the state police that she had, she said Marty Deal was bald as a baby's ass. Mike, she used to babysit for Mike Shelton and Marty Deal, so she knew him well. And she told him that he had driven the red Chevette to her home needing help. And I tried for years, I tried my best to get the Shelton property searched. Mike, he's dead now, but he was in jail in 2012, I think it was. He had a wreck that killed 2 people. I talked to his attorney, Elizabeth Vaughn, and begged her, blame it on Marty. Everybody else has. This whole thing has been blamed on Marty. Just ask Mike what Marty did with her, anything. Just tell me where Heather is. And he refused to talk. Now he's named in the search warrant also, but I have questions that were supposed to have been taken to the grand jury to ask him questions, but it never happened. So for some reason, this Shelton character, the brother-in-law, was never questioned.
I read in the 340-page FBI report that's out on the FBI's website, The Vault, that they found a shoe print at the wooded area, and just wanted to know if you'd heard, did they compare that shoe size to Marvin Deal's shoe size, and what you may know about that?
No. What happened was I actually have pictures of inside the Deal trailer when when the detectives were in there wearing no gloves, picking up items. The gun, I'll have to send that to you. This is very interesting. The gun that was used was on the bathroom sink. And the report that I just reread a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact, they turned the electricity off, which that's a part of this other audio that I really want to explain in depth. But there was a thump heard under the trailer. The lights kept being flashed on and off. He was already agitated, because he was being blamed for the entire day. And I think he may have helped Mike Shelton after the fact, but I know for a fact he wasn't on the beach. He wasn't the man Walthall described. And there was 2 shots heard. I haven't sent you that file yet. There were 2 shots heard and an argument. So I don't, and I have another report, which the names are redacted, but the only person it could be would be Ernie Green, the uncle, stating that his death was suspicious, a suspicious suicide. I don't think for 1 minute he committed suicide.
Yeah, that was something that crossed my mind when I read the information. Did they happen to swab his hand for gunpowder residue? I don't really know if they had that technology back then. Do you know anything?
No gunpowder residue test was even done. I have it in the coroner's report. There were no, but Detective Atherton told me right after this happened, he showed me on his hand and forefinger where there were powder burns. But that's another thing that's not true, because I have their own records, and no, there wasn't any gunpowder residue test done.
When did you do the reenactment on the Newburgh Beach?
4-year anniversary,
Mm.
the 4th year that I did a reenactment. I stood in Tim Walthall's front yard. He wouldn't let me come in the house, and I used the telescope strength .25 that he said he had used, and you can't see the dirt road from there, and you can see. I was able to see, pretty plainly somebody standing there.
Would you have been able, with your view from it, would you have been able to give the description that he gave from that distance?
In 15 to 20 seconds, I don't think there's any way anybody could have given those distinct facial features. Of course, like I said, now we know that had Marty Dill's Bronco not been filmed, Marty Dill's 94 driver's license wouldn't have been used on the sketch. That's the thing. And if you listen really closely to that call, which, like I say, it wasn't a call for help at all, but when he did finally talk to the state police, if you listen really closely, of course, you can tell he's not panicked at all. But other than that, it appears, he says, her belongings are right here. I think he was already on the Kentucky side when he talked to the Kentucky State Police. In fact, he claims he radioed Trooper Klein back to the abduction site. And his whole story, I want him subpoenaed and questioned. I keep sending I'm free with his wife on Facebook, and I guess anyway, I keep sending her messages, just asking, just do the right thing. Everything he said is not true, but the state police made out like everything he said was gold, except when he picked Christopher Below from a lineup 3 different times.
I saw that as well.
Yes. You think they did anything? Mm-mm.
Now, did they ever take a statement of his wife? Because even though she wasn't looking through the telescope,
No.
He refers back and forth that he'd talked to his wife on what he was seeing.
That's a very good point. I've never even thought of that. That's a very good point. No, sir. To my knowledge,
Okay.
she was never. But I'm telling you, when I met them on November the 22nd, I sat right beside her on the couch, and she was flipping pages of something. Like, this was barely 6 weeks into this, so I didn't hardly have a lick of sense. But she was trying. I think she was trying to show me something. And of course, now that we've got the FBI files back, Heather's last known whereabouts was at 3. It says 3 p.m. on a public boat ramp. Well, she met James Hendricks at 3 a.m. on that public boat ramp. So there's so many things that need to be explained.
I agree. I know in my research they talked about a Glenn Rogers, but he was blonde-headed. But when I dug into the Christopher Below, and the Ohio newspaper had some really good detailed stories tying your daughter to him. And then that talked about in 2000 that Bello was back in the Evansville area. He stayed with a half sister, and that she had made statements that he frequently went over to the beach area and wandered around and got quiet and things as well, but they never could get enough to do anything.
Well, Melinda and James Below, her name was Melinda Bass, but they came to my home. In fact, I just talked to James Below the other day. See, his mother lived in Reed, right there on the beach, and this is something that I don't know. Remember if they put this in the newspaper or not? But James Below, the dad, and his stepsister Melinda told me that, and if you look closely at that sketch, the picture of Below, he's got tattoos all over him. Yep. So my question was, how did the eyewitness give the features of his body but no tattoos? Well, I found out that the night Marty Dill died, Christopher Below went to Georgia and got those tattoos after.
And that would make sense if you're trying to disguise. Absolutely. That's the only way you could disguise yourself, unless you shaved your head.
Right. Well, I had talked to caseworker Christopher when he was in prison. He was released from prison November the 21st November the 13th of 2021. And I had talked to his caseworker for years, and I was telling her, I was sending Heather's picture to him, and I'd like to see how he would react. And of course, she said he's a complete sociopath. He wouldn't react at all. But the lieutenant that I spoke with right before he was released, he let me know, and of course, I didn't know what size shoe Marty or anybody wore until I got the files, and that's one of the questions that I kept asking. And on the video of when the state police went in to Marty Deal's trailer, they did show like shoe boxes, and it was like 10.5, I think 10.5. But Christopher Below wore a size 10.
Wow.
His lieutenant let me know that that's what size shoe he had worn.
I mean, my personal gut feeling with what I've read about this guy, she was killed. He's responsible. But I know you've got other information from files that lead you to believe maybe she's still alive, correct?
He what?
That you've got information based on some possible phone calls that you believe that your daughter's still alive.
Well, I don't know that she's not, is
right.
the thing. If I could ever get information that she knew Chris Below, if she knew Mike Shelton, if she knew Marty Deal, if there was a connection between Mike, Marty, and Mike, Marty, and Christopher Below, I mean, I've got pictures when Mike Shelton, Marty Deal, and Chris Below, they were in the 3rd grade together. And Poole, Reed, that area, it's all tied together. But I still don't have any. I don't have any confirmation that they knew Heather, or that they even. Of course, Mike and Marty were brother. That Mike was Marty's brother-in-law. But I don't know. I don't have proof that Christopher Below and Mike Shelton and Marty Deal ever knew one another. And
the one newspaper article that I read said that there was ties, and I wish I didn't write it down, but there was a bar in Kentucky that Dill was known to frequent, Below was known to frequent, and they said that your daughter had made a phone call from.
Now that was the Red Horse Lounge that I was talking about.
Okay.
That was the Red Horse Lounge that I had just told you about. She had made a phone call about 10 o'clock that morning. And I'm trying to I just read in the files where she had gone into the store right there before you get to Newburgh Beach. She had gone into the store, and the state police had asked the lady for the video surveillance. So I'm in the process right now of trying to file an open record to get, I would love to see her.
Yes.
I would love to have that. And of course, it's not in the records that they ever got the video surveillance as attachment or anything. Of course, that's not unusual. The meeting we had in 2008 when they played a call that Wathall made with a female, which I know now she was an actress, Tim Wathall, and a female. Tim Wathall is saying that Marty Deal wore a wig and mosquito netting. That call has totally disappeared. I have filed open records after open records. Oh, I do have the paper record of the day that call was played for us. They even stood. Kentucky State Police stood in front of Judge Shepard, claiming that there's only one call. And I've got records plainly. Tim Wathall called Indiana State Police at 1:15. Then he turns around and calls back the next morning, August the 27th at 10:40 a.m. And despite phone calls and open records, they denied that they recorded that. It was written on a sticky note. It was written on a sticky note that this man had called in about an abduction, and they gave him Kentucky State Police's phone number, if you believe that.
No. I mean, back in the day, I was a big scanner buff, and Indiana had better systems and stuff than Kentucky did back then. But that recording, because I know you and your lawyer listened to that. And what's funny is when I went back looking at newspapers, I didn't see any references to the netting in any of the newspapers.
Oh, no.
But other people who's done stories about your daughter always refers to that 911 call. And it's kind of bugged me since I started digging into this.
Well, when I met Tim Wathall, he called me into the kitchen, And that's where I was headed a while ago to tell you about. He called me into the kitchen away from his wife, and by that time, even by November the 22nd, when I met the eyewitness, there had already been people telling me, Marty Deal was bald. He had to have his head shaved when he was in Webster County Jail. Doris Crowley, the jailer, had made a comment, which I've not gotten his official statement, that he had to have his hair cut off to be custodian. So by November the 22nd, I had already been asking the state police and making all these references, running to them, hey, Marty Deal was bald. Marty Deal was bald. Marty Deal wasn't the one that took Heather. Well, Tim Wathall calls me into the kitchen away from his wife and tells me Marty Deal wore a wig and mosquito netting. And I said, where did you come up with that? And he said, Dave, which referred to David Osborne. And see what it was, and I know you've done your research, Marty Deal was the only suspect in the 94 rape where the MO was broad daylight and the suspect wore a mosquito netting. Nothing was ever said about a wig. Of course, Marty Deal was bald, so they had to put the wig as a description, to hide that. And I'm telling you, on July the 27th, and I know you probably didn't want to get into this right now, but
no, it's fine. Go ahead.
I had been so frustrated from filing open records, and I had gotten an open records back, and it popped up 403 forbidden. And I got up from Heather's room from the computer, and I walked down the hall. And as I do every day, I just say, God, please let me have her back. And these words came to me so plain. I ran and wrote them down, and I called my daughter Holly. An undeniable truth is coming. They can no longer deny, and they will have no choice but to tell our family. 2 days later, I sat down at the computer in Heather's room and pull up the Kentucky State Police audios, went straight to Tracy _DUI_ reviewed, opened it up. There was not one word about Tracy Deal, but everything I had been fighting for 28 years was there. Bill Polk is telling the state police, first he's saying, don't surround him, wait till daylight, let me go in, and the first thing I want to do is ask Marty about Heather. And then he says, Marty doesn't fit that description. Marty is shorter, he's lighter, and he does not have bushy hair and a beard. I started shaking so hard with tears falling down my face, and they have laughed at me, denied every letter, denied every jail record, denied everything. And there it was. Not only did they know that he did not have dark bushy hair and a beard on day 4, they didn't ask him about Heather, and he was the only one. He knew what had happened that day because he had left with Mike Shelton. He was their only hope in finding Heather, and Heather's name wasn't even mentioned, not by one FBI, not by the special response team, not by a state policeman. And their strategy of going and getting Marty, or whatever their strategy was, Bill Polk wanted him alive. Evidently they didn't, because the lights kept being blinked off and on. Somebody was underneath the trailer. A thump was heard. They agitated the man. And from what evidence I have, I don't think he shot himself at all. I think he had information about the pornography ring, about the drugs, the prostitution, and Heather had confronted the same judge that had signed off on the search warrant. I know now that she had confronted Judge Ivy and Paul Lloyd, the strip club owner, about underage girls and prostitution. So that's what happened. Heather disappeared on Tim Wathall's watch because he was watching for her boyfriend to come down to buy drugs. Mike Klein was already on the beach. Kentucky State Police were already there, supposedly pulling a truck out of the mud that got stuck the night before. But at the time Heather was abducted, it started leaking gasoline. And the only reason that they panicked had to have been that Heather disappeared on their watch. Now, whether Tim Wathall is DEA, FBI, ISP, KSP, I don't know. But there is no doubt in my mind that he was watching Heather. And the one hope that I have that she could be alive is that she knew she was being watched, and she didn't want to testify against these people. She didn't want to bust Robin, whatever. And she may have pulled a trick and got out of here. I don't know. I don't know how that would tie into Mike Shelton at all. But in 2002, Holly received a phone call, and it was a collect call. Back then we didn't have cell phones. And the girl, it was a collect call from Holly. And that's all Holly heard was the operator say, you have a collect call from Holly. And immediately in the background, after Holly accepted the charges, a man's voice was saying something to effect, you've lived a life in hell and paying for your sins. And that just happens to be what I wrote in 1998. Let me show you. That's where I got this already. This little Remembering Heather booklet, I wrote this in 98, and I was trying to raise money to get a detective, but I ended up giving most of them away. But I had written something similar to what the man said. And of course, we reported it to the Kentucky State Police and to the FBI to get this call traced. Well, when I got the FBI file or the state police's files, there it was, 2002. The FBI agent Glenn Wildy had contacted the state police to tell them that Heather's social security number was being used. He even makes the point to say, please check with the neighbors. Detective Rasco got a subpoena and found out that a Holly Teague Perkins was living in Newport, Kentucky with a lady named Tammy Storch, near her, whatever, and they stopped. They didn't remember that Holly had received a phone call the very same year, and we reported it to the state police and the FBI. This is what I thought until the other day. And now I'm wondering if when we reported that phone call, if we led them straight to her, because who was posing as Holly Teague Perkins? Holly lived in Madisonville with
That's
two
what I was
babies.
getting ready to say, because she didn't live anywhere near that area.
He didn't live there. And the other thing is, I called Glenn Wildy as soon as I got this report, saw this report. I was like, oh my God, that's the year the Paul Lloyd, Mike Heron, and Eddie Jones, who was Tim Walthall's attorney, were busted. That's the same year, and that's the same year that Holly got the phone call. So I immediately contacted Glenn Wildy. He was retired, and an agent named Elizabeth Hensley contacted me. So for 4 months, we were in contact. And of course, I sent her all kind of stuff. I make her head spin. I questions, Heather's last known whereabouts and this and this. The state police took her off this case. The state police, Elizabeth, for like a month went by and she wasn't returning my calls. The next thing I know, I'm getting an email from a lady named Mandy Corrigan, and she says that the Kentucky State Police just took them off the case. That was 4 months ago. And I've been writing to this lieutenant every single day. Could you please tell me who was posing as Holly using Heather's social? Because for the state police to have taken this lady off the case, it makes me wonder if they didn't find her. And there's some reason why they took her off the case. They won't tell me anything. I have begged, pleaded, written. I wrote to the lieutenant again yesterday, and I said, do you not understand, by you not telling me anything and by you taking this FBI off this one lead, the only lead we've ever had that Heather could be alive, that this is just cruel and heartless for you just not to tell me. I even wrote to Detective Rasco. I tracked him down in Sturgis and called the post office and asked the lady if I know she couldn't give me his address, but I said, would you see to it that he gets a letter from me? And she said, yes, ma'am, you write the letter. And for them to take that lady, the FBI, it's called VICAP, Victims of a Violent Crime.
Yep.
That's who had contacted the state police in 2002. So as of today, they still won't tell me why they took the FBI off the case. And since it did tie into when Holly got that phone call, of course I'm going to wonder,
Yes.
Of course I'm going to wonder if that was Heather. And now with everything else, they have created a phone call. They put a man's driver's license on a composite sketch. How do they expect me to believe that they're telling me the truth about anything? We absolutely don't know what happened to Heather after she walked down to the beach. When you stop and think about it, a man with dark bushy hair and a beard is one of the most common descriptions that's ever given.
Yep.
And that's what he described at first. But it took them 4 days before they did a sketch, and only after the film of that Bronco was turned in. So they really didn't have, all he said was a man with dark bushy hair and a beard. And actually, in the little audio that I just listened to, which is almost inaudible, with his first interview on the beach with Agent Cooper, I think, KSP Kupper, he says, well, we got a hot one.
Hmm.
We got a hot one. And the man that took her was like 200 pounds. And he goes on to explain what he means about a hot one. He said she unbuttoned took her bathing suit top off. And I'm wondering if that's if that's a slang for drugs. We got a hot one. Something happened. I'm telling you, they panicked because Heather disappeared on his watch. There is no other explanation. The reason for all of this, why wouldn't they, when I came to them with this evidence years ago, why wouldn't they say, yes, Miss Teague, we knew on day 4? They can't, because this whole entire investigation has been a charade. I mean, there's more made up stuff than there are real facts.
So
I don't claim that lightly. I really don't.
no. So let me back up a little bit. So in your opinion, do you think your daughter's disappearance is not by Philo or Dill, or do you think it was a true cover up for information she knew, or is that just a option?
Well, knowing what I know now, she met with James Hendricks the night before, and the FBI brings him to my home a year after they were already taken off the case. So I don't know. All I know is I believe she's the one that called Holly in 2002. I believe there's a chance. Of course, the Mike Shelton having run over Heather, that doesn't mean that she was killed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Do you think she's in hiding on her own, or do you think police or FBI or somebody has got her in hiding?
I don't know. I send you the file of her last known whereabouts. At the top right corner, it says WP program. And in 2008, there was a lot of stuff going on in 2008. The FBI lady who was an advocate in 2005, see, the FBI came to me in 2005 to tell me to get an attorney to sue the Kentucky State Police Post 16 because the evidence they had taken from the Bronco, which is protocol, and given to state police, had been found 10 years later, still sitting in evidence. And Heather's bathing suit bottoms were just sent off after 27 years. So I don't know. When I asked the FBI about there was like 5 files that I needed to explain in Heather's last known whereabouts. About the one file that says Heather's abduction is strongly linked to drugs, prostitution, public corruption, and strip club is in parentheses. And then the state police were keeping a secret of who the people involved in Heather's murder. So when I asked the FBI after I got their files, Agent Pape in Owensboro, I called him and he said, Miss Teague, he said, it will do you no good to come here. He said, you need to take your concerns to the office of the Inspector General in Washington, D.C. I did. Her files went round and round, and Agent Michael McDonald finally talked to me, and he said, Miss Teague, this is so strange. He said, Heather's files, the documents or the concerns that I had sent in, went from the DOJ to the FBI inspections to the FBI investigations. He said they need to go to the Public Corruption Criminal Activity Division. So I had talked to a man named Sergio Galvan, and it was like just hushed. It was like they wouldn't return my calls anymore. So I don't know.
It sure sounds suspicious.
Oh my goodness.
No, I know when you reached out to me after I did the Andy story, I was blown away with a lot of the information that you sent me, and then I started digging in. And what just drives me nuts, I grew up in the Henderson County area. Now I'd moved away by that point, but that I didn't never hear of your daughter's story before.
Really?
And yeah, I've had family that still lived in the Henderson area, but I never heard the story. Of course, back then you didn't have internet like we do now. So the only thing I can chuck it up to is at the time I was living in Nashville, because of lack of news, I didn't come across it. But it's just, and the sad thing, I seen in an article that you'd made a statement that the only person that's had any charges brought against them has been you.
Yeah. They were actually standing outside. See, the way that happened, I kept writing Tracy after she pled the fifth. I kept writing her letters. I knew she wouldn't open them, so I'd put Heather's picture on the back. One year I dropped lavender ribbons all in her yard, and she actually came out. She came out in her front yard, and she looked at me and she said, "When I get off probation," she goes like this. She says, "Pow, you're a dead woman." Well, I went straight to the state police. I think it was post 2 then. And they were like, well, how many times have you threatened her? And I said, absolutely none. I said, I've been writing her letters asking her who was screaming at 8:00 that night. And in 2016, the same lady that came forward to tell me that Mike Shelton had driven the red Chevette to her home on Sunday morning, she went to Tracy Deal, and I've got all this. I can send that to you too. She says that Tracy was crying, and she said that Tracy had said, all I could do was scream. So in 2016, after all these years, I knew that Heather wasn't screaming, that it was Tracy Deal that was screaming. Now, she's been granted complete immunity in 2006, which I find that ironic, because in 2005 is when, Chris Below came into the picture. So for some reason, the state police granted her complete immunity in 2006. But yes, the state police came to my home one day because I had watched the film of the video of the Bronco, and it appeared like there was 2 men coming up, or a man coming up to the open driver's side door. And I called the FBI and everything. I said, I don't know what y'all done. It was awful. I had called them, and the state police came, and I had a letter written to Tracy laying on the table. Now, they came just because I had concerns about the video I had just watched. But they saw the letter that I had written to Tracy, and next thing I know, I'm getting taken to court for harassment, and the state police were waiting outside to testify against me.
Wow.
Of course, the judge immediately had Tracy to read a letter, and Tracy read the letter that I had written, and the judge looked at her and said, you think that's harassment? And of course, they threw everything out. It wasn't harassment. I never threatened her. I just wanted to know if she knew Heather was screaming that night.
I don't know any mother that wouldn't do what you did. I couldn't imagine any of my stepchildren that if something like that happened, I would take every means possible to find information. And
well, it's like I'm a thorn in their side. That they've been so rude to me, and I remember one captain, Robert Schultz. I kept filing open records, and he said, of course, he's the one that said when I presented the 3 jail records, all that say bald, he said, oh, I'm sure they meant brown. And then he said, you can file all the open records you want. He said, you're not going to get nothing. And then I read an email that, of course, I saved all the emails. He was like, you're not going to talk to us like this. You're not going to make accusations and accuse us of this and this. From now on, this is your point of contact. Well, since this new lieutenant has been on the case over a year now, I've had no point of contact. I've not even heard his voice. And the only messages he'll relay to me is about the DNA.
Wow. Well,
it's just
but if you don't, the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's true. I mean, I've just recently got into podcasting this year, and the stories that I've read, the parents or even the sister down in Florida that's trying to find her sister, if you don't stay up on it and keep bringing it attention, it seems like they just fall off of it. And I mean, your case is the same way. I mean, as I was digging in, almost every year there's been an article in the newspaper where you've pushed and brought attention to it, seen where you were, I don't know if it was president or something of a missing persons group a few years ago as well. And I think what you've been doing all these years is the only way to do it, is to keep questioning, keep bringing it up. Maybe someday we'll get answers.
Well, we're at the most serious point in this whole entire investigation, and I use that word very lightly, because now they know, as of July the 29th, they know that I know without a doubt that they knew on day 4 that Marty Deal was not the man that took Heather, and that they did not change their strategy as soon as Bill Pope told them Marty doesn't fit that description. Their whole strategy should have changed. Mm-hmm. Their whole strategy should have been finding out what Marty knew about Heather, who was driving his Bronco that day. He knew, and they did not even ask about Heather. So that right there lets me know that one, did they not care at all, or something else was more important? Shutting Marty Deal up was more important than finding Heather. It's just not right. And I write this often. It's a shame and a disgrace to all that we hold precious, what they've done. But like I say, now, since July the 29th, they know that I know. And of course, the newspaper article, John Webb did an excellent article on September the 10th about the audio. And then just recently, the story was done about the 2008 phone call.
Yep.
I mean, for that call to have totally disappeared, and for them to stand up in front of Judge Shepard and say that there was only one call. There were actually 4 calls. He called Indiana State Police at 1:15 on the 26th. He called at 10:40 again the next morning. There was a 2008 phone call that was played for us, and then the one that we were allowed to hear after 20 years. And Judge Shepard looked at them in 2017 when we stood before him. He said, "Why is this mother having to fight to hear a 911 call?" He said, "I hear them all day, every day." So Judge Shepard knows that something is really wrong here. They've committed perjury and obstruction of justice. And I believe we're headed to a criminal area right now, because for them to do what they did on day 4 and to criticize me and mock me and deny every lead that I took to them, how is that not obstruction of justice? I don't know. And I know they stood up in front of Judge Shepard and didn't tell the truth. And I know that's perjury.
Yep.
So now that's where we are.
So where do you think this is going to go from here?
I need a civil rights attorney is what I need. In 2005, when the FBI came in to tell me to get an attorney to sue the state police, then there were a lot of things that were just speculations. I have proof in their own files. I have proof now what they've done. I don't know why they've done it. I know what they've done. And the only why could possibly be, with everything I know now, that Heather disappeared on their watch. And that involves Tim Walthall, the eyewitness. So I would like for these 4 officers who were in the room with us the day that Chip, Holly, and I were played that call with the wig and mosquito netting. I mean, a female dispatcher. It's totally different from the call that we were played in totally different, And I didn't send you this, but I have a KSP 41, which shows plainly that the reel-to-reel call was kept in Lieutenant Osborne's desk until November the 28th of 95. That means he kept that call in his desk for 3 months and 2 days. It was then sent to a man named Doug Crow, who is a creative specialist, on August the 17th of 07. He kept it until September the 24th of 07, and we were played that call on August the 27th of 08. So you tell me that is not when that call was created.
Wow.
I mean, I've got it. I've got it. I've got, and of course I've confronted the state police with all of this, and I tell them I'm praying for your hearts every day. And I had a vision one year, or a dream or whatever, that 7 or 8 men were lined up and they had their heads hung down. And the day that Chip and I went to court, in this dream, I saw those big cherry doors, and I said, "Chip, this is what was in my dream." And in the dream also, I busted through these doors, and Heather was laying on this desk, and her hair was all hanging down. And I thought then that there would be justice someday. And it's going to take a lot for these officers to admit what they even heard in 2008. It's going to take a lot. And for me to realize now that they all knew, no matter how many different captains, lieutenants, sergeants, detectives. Of course, God sent us one good sergeant, Sergeant Jason Pagan. He's the one that let us hear that call in 2016. But if their hearts aren't touched, I don't know what it's going to take to make them tell the truth, because for them to keep this a secret for 28 years that Marty Deal was bald, and they didn't even question Heather. How are they ever going to, the FBI stood right there in my house and said, all Chip has to do, he had just gotten out of law school, bless his heart. All Chip has to do is file the lawsuit. The judge will issue a gag order and say $5 million is what she said. And then she said, but you won't ever be able to talk about the state police again. Now here you got the FBI telling me to sue the state police. but I won't be able to talk about the state police again. Well, we're way ahead of 2005 now because, like I said, the speculations that we had have now been confirmed. I've got positive proof in their own files, and it just, I know how God revealed that to me that day, that it is an undeniable truth. But to think back at all these years that I went to them, I mean, just like Heather said, holding heart and soul in hand. Would you just look at this? Marty Deal didn't do it. Marty Deal's head was shaved while he was in jail. And for them to laugh at me, and one sergeant almost turned upside down looking at that Marty Deal's picture, and I'm sure he had, well, his hair's pulled back in a ponytail. And they already knew on day 4, they knew.
Yeah, I tried to do a search, be impossible to find, but to see if there was a mug shot of Marty Deal from when he was arrested. But of course, the internet wasn't around then, so I'm sure none of those old
No, well,
mug shots.
what happened was those 3 jail records state plainly bald. And of course, he was in and out of jail. One day, it was ironically Heather's birthday, April 25th. But of course, I've tried to get that too, but I was told that there had been a fire at Webster County Jail, and maybe that's where his mugshot then was. I don't know. But of course, we know the day he was released from jail, he was totally bald, and he didn't have a pot belly. He had muscles, but he was their last chance to find out where Heather was, and they didn't even mention her name, and that is a shame and a disgrace.
Now that composite to me is just identical to Fellow.
It is. And did you look him up on Facebook? He is now posing. He's got real short hair, glasses, looks like a preacher, and he's working as a dog groomer. And a couple months ago, or maybe last year, Stephanie Sylvie, who used to be an investigative reporter with 14, a lady had called her to tell her that she was dating Chris Melo and that she had just found out, his past. And she was wanting to get away from him. She was scared to death because he was wanting her to go out of town with him. And I reported this to the state police. But
I wonder if she looked anything like your daughter and the other young lady that.
Dark hair, yes.
Yeah.
She was short with dark hair, absolutely. Yes.
Well, anything else you would like people to know about of this case?
Just that undeniable truths have been revealed, and I know Heather's coming home. I don't know if I'm going to see her walk through the door or if I'll find a bone or whatever, but I do know without a doubt that something is so off when you've got the eyewitness doing what he's done and the state police doing what they've done. Something is, well, I was told this the other day, and I don't even know if I should speak it out loud, but I was told that this is going to be one of the biggest political cover-ups in the tri-state area. And in 2003, my pastor, Allison Goodman, came to me. And see, this was right after the 2002 ordeal. She came to me and she said, when this is all said and done, this will be a wonder to all mankind. And people will be saying, that mother, stand and declare, to God be the glory. There's just a bigger picture going on here. When Heather can write, and I am a poster child, and I wrote, I missed it by one day when she was 23 months old, August the 25th of 1974. You can't explain that except, I guess, at the end of this, it's going to be one heck of a love story.
All I know is you deserve answers one way or another, and hopefully people who were part of it back then, their conscience will get the best of them and speak out.
Well, unfortunately, when you've got the Kentucky State Police involved and a millionaire with businesses in South America, people are afraid to speak out because they know. I mean, even Tracy and all the people around that little group, they know that Marty was bald. They knew Marty was being blamed, but they knew there was more to it because the state police are involved. They know that. That's why they've not come forward. No, it's going to be the Kentucky State Police that's going to end up telling that I just pray they fall on their face and just their hearts just change. That's all I keep praying. And I think it's going to be like dominoes. It's going to take one. Of course, Sergeant Pagan has already come forward, but it'll just take one, and the truth will come out.
Well, I hope for your sake that it happens sooner than later, because you've gone through many, many years.
Well, 28 years has been taken from us, either way you go about it.
And you have 2 other daughters?
Oh, I have 2 other daughters, Holly and Haven, and my son, Nathaniel. I moved to Manchester from Madisonville to be near my son and watch my grandbabies grow up. I have great grandbabies now.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm so glad you reached out to me, and this case has just blew my mind. And I'm so proud to be able to tell your daughter's story, and hopefully the right people will see it and have a change of heart.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and
Thank you so much.
I'll be staying in contact with you.
I know you will.
I want to thank Sarah Teague again for letting me help tell Heather's story. Let's discuss Heather's description and pertinent information. On August 26, 1995, Heather Danielle Teague was 23 years old at the time she was abducted. She would be 51 years old today. She was 5 foot 1 inches tall, weighed 90 to 100 pounds, with long, dark brown hair and green eyes. She also had a noticeable curvature of the spine due to scoliosis and flat feet. She had a red, round birthmark on her right buttocks. She was last seen in Spotsville, Kentucky, at the area known as Newburgh Beach along the Ohio River. If you have any information regarding Heather's abduction, contact the Kentucky State Police at 270-826-3312. Case number 16951327. I want to end this story with a verse that Sarah has quoted many times through the last 28 years. So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. Matthew 10:26. The stories I tell about the missing, I hope, arms you with new information about this missing person that might lead to finding them. Additionally, I hope that you will share the information about this person in hopes that by sharing, it may lead to locating this person. As with almost all missing person cases, there is someone out there that knows something. Please come forward and contact the authorities. Once again, I'm Big Papa Rob, and this was an independent podcast called Story Rewind. Story Rewind, The Missing, is written, produced, and edited by Big Papa Rob. I couldn't do this without the support of my wonderful wife, aka Big Mama. For a donation to help cover my operating costs, you can buy me a cup of coffee. You can find the link in my show notes or on my social media pages. Your support would be greatly appreciated. I would appreciate a 5-star rating if you listen to my podcast through Apple Podcasts. And finally, if you have a story idea, please contact me through my social media. A link to all my social media accounts is listed in the show notes. I would love to hear from you. Today's music was The Shield by Hot Dope from Pixabay. This will be my last podcast for 2023. I'll be back in the first week of January with a whole new episode. I'll see you then, and have a great holiday and a happy new year. This was a Big Papa Rob podcast 2023.